Margita, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. You're joining us from London, and you said that's not exciting, but I think it's super exciting. So I'm just saying, love everything England. Love everything England.
No, you said, Cherie. Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think we're going to have a really soulful discussion today, especially as we look at rounding out 2022 and some of the lessons learned planetary wide and just in our own personal beings. It feels like a year that was just a lot of things were really up for people, like culminating. But I want to start with your story. You have a trauma story, as many of us do. But yours started very early in life and it brought you to this work of consciousness expansion and evolution. So anything that you're open to share with us that will help us maybe even insert some of our dark times into what you walk through, anything that you're willing to share there.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I'm pretty much an open book, right? Because I don't have a shame factor or fear label,
So
you know.
awesome. So
I
awesome.
I just don't have that anymore. And that's one of the reasons I'm open to speaking my truth. And I've come to this, I mean, it took me a long time, trust me, it took me a long time to come to that point in life because I always cared what others thought of me. I was always scared of hurting people, right? But it's not about that. It's about how you feel about yourself and it's about understanding yourself. Other people don't have to understand you. You have to understand you, right? Because you are you. And yes, I started very early in life with trauma. And I always say to people, because many people will say, yeah, but I didn't choose this. Yeah, I didn't choose this experience. But actually, hold on a minute, you did. You see, prior to me being born, I must have been off my head. I must have been drunk, when I
I
signed
think we were
when I
all
signed
like,
my
it just sounded
contract.
like Disneyland, like sign me up for everything. I'm in.
Exactly,
Sounds
right?
really fun, exciting. I think
Yeah.
because we thought we had, I mean, because we had such a deep connection to source, and I think we knew at that time it could never be, we could never be separated from it. So we were willing to endure anything. But then when we got here, we were like feeling all the separation because we
Yes.
forgot.
Yes. Absolutely. We got whacked on the head, right? And we come in cold turkey. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I was abused as a kid by a child of the family, and this was around 10 or 11 years old. And it's not, I mean, my mom and dad never knew. I didn't even talk about it. I mean, the 1980s that was a completely different era to the times that we live in now, right?
Mm.
And I only told my mom when I was 19 after watching an Oprah Winfrey show. And she said, you know what? I'm glad that neither you or your sister were abused as a kid. And I
Mm.
stayed very, very quiet, and then I told her, and the first thing she said, of course, was it your dad? And I'm like, no. And then I explained it to her. And there was so much shame there. I mean, that wasn't the only thing that happened. I mean, that's what it started with. And then, when I grew up in Singapore, Malaysia for about 5 years, and I loved it. I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved the food. But
Mhm.
when we went back to Holland, because my dad was just he'd been bankrupt for
That's where
for
you're
for a while.
originally from, is Holland.
I'm Dutch. Yes, I'm
Mhm.
a mixture of different nationalities, but I was born in Holland. My mom is actually Indian Indonesian, and
Mm.
my dad was German Dutch, and then there is French and Belgian on my grandmother's side as well. So my mom's very dark skinned. Yeah, but at the age of 13, we went back to Holland, and yeah, my dad died a couple of months later of con she had a heart disease. It was just heart failure. And actually refused to take his medication because he thought he could cure himself. Just wasn't that advanced. He was a Rosicrucian. So he worked a lot with alchemy, actually, which I found out many, many, many years later.
That is a
So
fascinating, that is a fascinating field. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And he worked with the Ascended Master, something I didn't even know. And because I knew he used to meditate a lot, but he had a family. And the thing is, he was imbalanced, so to speak, because he was too much in the spiritual. And when he couldn't work, my mom worked. It wasn't an issue, but um she did tell him, you have a family to take care of, and I can't do this on my own. But he, yeah, he went cycling one day near the beach, and he just fell off his bike, and that was it. Took a last breath, and that was it. Gone.
Wow.
He was, yeah, he was going to be, what was he going to be? 44. Yeah.
So he was young.
So, yeah, he was very, very young, and it was very hard for me. It really hit me like a brick. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a headache, and I couldn't believe that he was gone. And I was adamant that he'd left a letter behind. And actually, a couple of days later, the hospital said, yes, he did leave a letter behind, and they gave it to my mom. And in it, he said, kind of, I do remember it. My mom threw it out though. Um, that he, it wasn't, not taking your medication, is that a form of suicide? I guess he was tired of life. That was it.
Mm.
And he knew that he was on his way home, so to speak. That I do remember. But that was very hard for me. And then when I had my high school, I was very skinny, right? I was very good at starving myself. And I was still young. And my mom didn't even know that, because I would just make my sandwiches, go to school, and just chuck them in the bin. But I was bullied at school as well. And I remember going to the Ardennes in Belgium, and for like this school camping trip. And there was this guy, very popular, and he grabbed my arm like this, and he's like, "Look how skinny she is," in front of all the kids.
Mm.
And that was horrible for me. But there were also kids that copied my homework. And because of what happened, right? Because of what happened, if there was a guy in the hallway and my classroom was 2 doors down, I would not pass that guy. I would take another route to the classroom. That's how scared I was of them. So I
Mhm.
was struggling a lot. And then my mom put me on this course, this modeling course, and to shake my to help me with my self-confidence. And that just didn't work, because I carried the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Mm.
And when a hairdresser picked me out to do a show, I had long hair like this, and he chopped it all off to like a pixie crop, and I felt horrible. I
Oh,
mean, don't get me wrong, he was lovely, but I felt horrible. But the thing is, when you start out with trauma and you don't heal that, you create more trauma, right?
yes,
Because
and it
that's
just
the
gets more
key.
and more complex because it becomes layered.
Yes.
And it's often, I've heard this definition. Are you familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate? Gabor Mate? I don't know how you say his name. Gabor Mate, Mate. And he defines trauma as it's not necessarily what happens to you, it's how you internalize what happened to you. So two people could literally have a side by side, like identical experience, and they are interpreting it very differently in their bodies. And one person could be horribly like paralyzed with trauma or PTSD level, but the other person, it's just a normal stress response. So it's how we're filtering it through our bodies and how we're perceiving that event and like how disempowered we become in that moment that makes it a trauma or not.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very valid point, because we disempower ourselves, right? Because it's like, why is this happening to us? But you're right. Two people can stand next to one another and observe things around them from a completely different perspective.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, like, I went into very toxic relationships because I didn't heal the trauma, and and they got worse and worse. And but in the end, I chose these relationships, and I'm going to tell you this. And I've forgiven them all, and I love them all, because they've been amazing
Mhm.
teachers. They were amazing teachers to my then very naive soul, right? Because I was a doormat. It just said big letters, welcome.
Mhm.
And because I really felt like I needed to fix them, right? But I needed to fix myself. Why was I fixing another person, right? It wasn't like some refurbishment project, but that's how I saw them, to
Mhm.
make me feel better about myself. And yes, they were abusive mentally. I'm not physically, but mentally. I mean, one was a crack addict, and I did save his life. He was in bed with the Crips in Holland. You know,
Wow.
it was that was really scary for me. But I mean, I helped the police, and he was deported back to the States. The leader of the Crips, who is behind bars now, I think that was last year, because it was a massive, massive trial in Holland, because I had to garner so much information. Because he was like a broker for hire, so murder broker for hire.
Wow.
And he had threatened my life, and he had said, if I find you, I'm going to kill you. And he said, you know, about my ex, if I ever find him, I'll make sure that he'll be dead in a ditch somewhere, and you will never find him. And I do remember that, and it shook me to my core. It really, really did. And my mom, I love her to bits. She's been my rock throughout, really. And she got me out of Holland in the space of 3 days. She had spoken to the police, and the police said it's the best thing that you take your daughter out of Holland.
Mm,
And but you know, in all of this, I mean, it doesn't matter where I was in the world. I always found a job. I was like a chameleon. I've done many jobs, you know, even from modeling, even though I was abused in the modeling industry as well, because it's fickle, it's superficial, and it's like a cattle market.
hmm.
And I mean, you know, I look back and I think, yeah, I mean, it was so bad. I mean, I even got fingered by a hairdresser, and I was so paralyzed by fear that I didn't even know what to do. And it's
Mm,
easy for people on the outside to say, you know what, if this happens to you, you punch his lips out or something, right? But at that moment, when you're in that situation, it's like you're frozen.
right.
And off, yeah, and often even with the abusive relationships that I was in, it was often like I was often in that fight or flight response. And when this happened in Holland, and I returned to the UK, I tried to overdose on very lame though, on aspirins, a whole box of aspirins. Well, that didn't do
Oh.
anything for me. I got rid of my headache, and the next day I
Mm,
woke up, you know, without it. But my mom told me, she said, Brigitte, why don't you go to counseling? And so I did. But when I went to see the counselor, all she said to me was, well, you know, after hearing your story, you know, you're strong enough, you'll be fine. Well, that wasn't helping me. So I had to dig deep, and that's when I found Reiki. And that really was the start of my healing journey, and that really helped me. And I actually
mm.
studied Reiki as well.
So let's kind of go back to the point where you made the choice to heal.
Hmm.
And, you know, kind of from that victim consciousness where we're always just attracting the wrong experience. And we're not obviously aware we're doing this, but when we've been hurt or traumatized or wounded or abused or what have you, we sort of send out a subconscious signal to continue the abuse because we feel either deserving of it or in various ranges of unworthiness because of the abuse. So, at what point did you sort of wake up and go, I'm not a victim? And how did that shift for you?
It wasn't like it was, whoa, in one go, you know, I
Sure.
wasn't a victim. I think that happened several years later after that. But this was the start of my healing journey, because I took that responsibility of wanting to heal, right? Because that's the main thing. You have to take accountability. It's easy for us to say, or for people to say, you know what, it's this person's fault, or they did this to me, they did that to me. No, at the end of the day, the person staring back in the mirror is you, right? So you
Yeah.
have to take that responsibility for your life. And so I did, because I wanted to get better. And there was so much bitterness that I had against this family. Um, you know, because they didn't even tell me that he was like a crack addict. And so I mean, I blamed him for a lot of things. So I went into regression, and I went back to a lifetime in the Byzantine Empire. And in that lifetime, I was married, and I had a child, a little girl. And I could describe, I mean, it's actually in my book where I describe the abode that I lived in. And my ex in that lifetime was my blood brother. So not my real brother, my blood brother. And his wife in that lifetime is his mother in this lifetime. And so because of him and because of what I wrote and my beliefs, he threw me in prison. I got thrown in prison, and that's where I died, so to speak. And in this lifetime, he is in the prison system. And so when I was, under, and I'm telling you, that was, I mean, it was deep for me to go into regression. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not like when you walk through the Akashic hall of records, so to speak, and do healing that way. Regression therapy is deep and it's intense. And I remember the therapist saying to me, do you see the similarities between that life and this life? And at that point, I was just so out of it. And I said, no. And then he said, but in that life, you did prison time. And he's like, in this lifetime, he's paying for that. But he needs to own his experiences and take responsibility rather than running around in circles, right? Because that's what people keep doing. They keep running around in circles. And it's, breaking that cycle and breaking that conditional mindset, because we're programmed a certain way. And we're programmed a certain way because of our experiences.
Right. We're a composite of all the stories and lived experiences that we've walked through. So I recognize that there might be a lot of listeners who don't relate with like previous lifetimes or things like that. So, I mean, it's these knowings we have, or these glimpses, or these modalities we go through, like regression therapy. They're not for everyone, but I think as a general rule, most of us feel the eternity of our soul, and we feel like, oh, maybe this earth time is not the only time I've lived. Maybe there's more to me as an eternal soul, past, present, future. But it's interesting, you're talking kind of about karma, where somebody can walk through really, everything returns to us, let's just say. Everything is returning to us, whether symbolically, mythologically, literally, or just, these relationships that we have and these associations we make in this lifetime are to help us heal and evolve. I just got a new book, and I'll find the name in a minute, because it's exactly what you're talking about. And I think a lot of my listeners will find it fascinating. But this idea that we started the discussion with around, how can we feel like a victim? How can we feel powerless and blame and project when, number one, we're drawing it to us from the law of attraction because of what vibes and signals we're sending out. And number two, we likely chose a lot of these really painful and discomforting and unpleasant experiences because we wanted to evolve. And so often our perpetrators or our teachers, and as messed up as that sounds, it's like we have these sacred contracts. I just found the book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of Life You Planned Before You Were Born. It was published in 2009, and the author is Robert Schwartz. Discovering the Meaning of Life You Planned Before You Were Born. It just came from Amazon yesterday, and I was just reading a little bit of it. So it's just funny that we're talking about this today.
I always say it's like life is like the game. It's a cosmic game of evolution, because people always ask me, "Well, why are we here then?" I'm like, "You're here to remember who you are, and you're here to learn and to evolve from your experiences, and you're here to help Mother Earth ascend, right? Because life is like this cosmic game of evolution. It's like this old board game of life, right? And that's what it is. But we get so lost in the maze of this earthly jungle, of this created society, that we just get lost in I always say, get lost in everything gets lost in translation, and we get so lost. And that's why, people think their experiences are so real, but if they see it as a game of cosmic evolution, right? And they let go and they heal up and alchemize these experiences and look back and laugh at them rather than remaining bitter and frustrated and angry, right? Then people can move forward, because it's all about forgiveness, right? You're here to garner all these experiences. As Spirit always say, I work a lot with the Ascended Master Saint Germain, but it's all these flavors and dishes, right, that you have in front of you, all these experiences. You can choose the really spicy ones, right? And then sweat the chilies and heal up and go to the next dish, so to speak.
Yeah. And it is interesting to me that, we get to choose. That's the beauty of all of this. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. I mean, it's all what our soul is orienting us toward. So our soul has, I guess, its own trajectory of the experiences it wants to have to evolve. But then our humanness and all these attachments that we have to different certain outcomes, or like what you were saying when you went into these dysfunctional relationships, is that you thought it would complete you, or you thought it would give you something that you didn't have. And really, I think for me, what it's whittling down to, the whole like purpose of life, is that we're just here to remember that we are love, that we are
Yes,
the source of that, in co-creation, of course, with the divine. And it's all a big mystery, but we're here to lift all these veils and come into like the heart of who we are, this
yes,
sacred, loving, compassionate, wise, powerful being.
absolutely.
And somehow it's just really hard to hold that space in this earth.
I know, but that's funny.
There's everything is against us in claiming that. It seems like it's all stacking up, but I see it shifting, don't you?
Yeah, it is shifting. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's the ending of my book, where Saint Germain says, life is merely a return to love, nothing more, nothing less.
Mm,
And that's what it is. Because if you love yourself, truly love yourself, and you return to that authentic nature of who you are and always have been, life becomes infinitely easier, right? Because you don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. But I had to also go through that in order to understand that. But in regards to the times that we live in, people are always like, yeah, but these are difficult times. I'm like, no, these are actually beautiful, transformational times that we live in, because our soul was not designed to live this way, right?
mm.
To live in this created societal matrix, so to speak, right? And many people suffer because of it. But yet they've chosen this life, right, to overcome this and to understand, to understand the experiences and rise above, right, to see life from a different perspective. Because I always call it like life is like, also like, the old game of Mario or Crash Bandicoot or Donkey Kong, even, right? Takes you forever to get to the next level, because you have to repeat the same experiences, so to speak, until you finally understand it, and then you go up a level. So it's kind of the same with life. But people say, yeah, but why are these things happening in the world? Because these things are happening so that people awaken to the fact that this is not really life. It's an illusion, right? Everything is an illusion. And it's also about people starting to love themselves, love one another, and live more in unity and in harmony with themselves,
Mhm.
others, and the world around them. And because we live so much in that separation, whilst we're not separate from one another, right? We're all cut from the same bark of wood, all of us. And yet we walk past each other in the street like we don't know one another.
Yeah. And I feel like that it's going to take an even, I mean, COVID kind of exacerbated that. We had to separate, we had to mask, we had to quarantine, we had to do all these things to separate even more. It feels like that was a pendulum shift, and that maybe the next series of events will be about where of necessity we need to come together. One of the biggest pain points I hear from people, and I experienced myself when I sort of took a sabbatical from my religion of origin and took a step back to just really look at, what pieces of this do I resonate with, what feels aligned for me, etc., was very painful. But that loss of community, and this is something I hear in multiple spaces. I hear it especially in young adults, because I have young adult children, and in their 20s, and they're like, it's really hard to find solid, healthy non-hierarchical communities where there's collaboration and inclusion and people aren't being marginalized. And that is a true pain point of humanity right now, because people feel so pushed to the margins if they don't believe a certain way, if they don't look a certain way, if they don't have a certain gender identity, whatever, sexual identity, it's so marginalized. And you're saying that's the illusion. We are actually all connected. We are all one. And that was actually kind of hard for me to swallow. That was a hard pill to swallow. It was a hard cosmic pill for me to swallow, because I wanted to be individuated. I wanted to feel, because I was sort of programmed to be the God's special people, God's favorites, God's elite, God's chosen, right? And to deprogram from that and just realize we're all together as one in the sea of humanity was like an ego death, an identity death.
Yeah. But ego means to eject God out, right? Yeah, and we do, because we've unplugged from source, and all we need to do is plug back into source to feel that connection again. And people are like, but how do I change? How do I do that? Well, it's always very simple. And people say it's so hard, but you have to take that responsibility for your life. Last time I checked, you're the captain of your own ship, right? So you steer the direction in which you choose to go. And but then they say, well, I've got this problem and that problem. Well, these are your created issues, right? You create and express yourself every single second of every single day, because you are a creator. Yeah, you were born to create. And people have...
You can't help but create.
Absolutely.
You can't not create. You're always creating.
I know. And it's really about empowering yourself and taking back that control, rather than, people say, well, it's like, how do I put this? You define your experiences, and it's not the other way around, unless you really choose to sit and let the experiences define you, right? That's entirely up to you.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting deep dive into going under, and going under the surface of the way things appear. And part of the process of awakening, like you said, is to just remember. So can you give us I know that you do a lot of work with multidimensionality and super cool, collective consciousness stuff, but can you give us a couple of tips that will sort of, I guess, support this process of seeing yourself and remembering that you are love and that we're all one, and kind of lifting the veils over our eyes, just so we can kind of ground into that? What are some of your favorite ways to do that?
Oh, well, I love meditating, and I love breathing. I think the art of breath is actually the most important thing to recenter yourself. And people think that's a whole lot of juju sometimes, but if some people are very lazy, then I always tell them, listen to 432 hertz on YouTube and plug that in. Some are 4 or 5 hours long or longer, and just
what is
it?
Is it like a binaural beat kind of thing, or
yeah,
what is
no,
it?
it's different. Binaural beats doesn't really it's never done anything for me. This is really 432 hertz is they do have binaural ones, but they have other music. And this is where it realigns your soul. It takes the stress away. There are others, but that's a really, really good one to start off with.
That's interesting. I was born at 4:32 a.m.
Oh, really?
Is there a reason they call it 4:32?
Yeah, it's all about soul realignment and taking away the toxicity and the stress and calming yourself and recentering yourself.
Yeah.
So
See it here on YouTube. It looks fascinating and beautiful imagery.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And people say, yeah, but my mind wanders when I meditate. Doesn't matter, because if you notice that, you go back to your breath. And I always say, it's like you've got to breathe in from your root chakra all the way up to the top of your head, right? Count to 8, hold it for 8, let it out 8, hold it 8, and do the same thing over. And you will see that after 10 minutes, even after 5 minutes, you will feel calm and collected. That's a powerful thing. I mean, some other people will go for a run, but it's really sitting with your thoughts and sitting with yourself, right? And rather than judging others, look at things from a different perspective. That's why I say, and again, it's your life. Take responsibility for your life. Don't argue with others, because what's the point in that? It only rattles your energy. And everyone you
It's like
meet,
what I'm hearing you say is sort of like preserve your own energy, take accountability for what's going on in here, get still, do what you need to do, breathe, and sort of contain that within yourself, your own life force.
yeah, and do something different. I went all out, and I did make a bucket list actually. I made a bucket list and did things like, when my stepdad passed in 2000, I promised he passed of throat cancer. I promised that I would run for charity. Well, that remained a figment of my imagination until I finally did in 2016. I finally did it. Or I went skydiving because I had a fear of heights. And this was actually in Florida when I was out in Florida. But yeah, and I mean, you've got to, in order to love yourself, right? You have to heal yourself. Because if you don't heal yourself, how can you ever love yourself and return to that wholesomeness that you most authentically are?
I think most people register what you're saying, but those two words that seem so heal yourself and love yourself are so big. So I like this idea of just taking really bite size, like you said, go do something new, change the way you breathe, just come back in. Meditate also can be, I'm finding as I work with people, a huge trigger word because they think they're doing it wrong. They have these expectations around it. And I don't know how you define meditation, but I think all it is just going within.
Yes, it is. Absolutely, it is. And it's just practice, you need to practice it. Just like when you go to the gym, you don't go once and you think, oh, you know what, that's it, I'm done with it. No, it's practice. And it's like I always said to people, it's time to declutter. What is it in your home that you don't need? Because we get I live very basic. I don't even have a TV anymore because I don't care for it. But I I always said to people, declutter, because I know your home is a mess. And they would say to me when they came to me for a session, they would say, yeah, you're right. You're right. And so that would make them feel better too. But some people have a hard time parting with things. And then they'll say, but I'm sorry, but when you cross over, do you think you're going to take it all with you?
You'll take the idea of it with you, and then you'll lament that you don't have it. No, I love just this idea of what you're saying is just radical self-accountability, radical self-love. I know you do coaching, and I like how you say you surf the cosmic waves across the multidimensional multiverse, delivering messages from the collective light beings and master teachers. And you mentioned that you work with ascended masters. I have heard of Saint Germain and a lot of these ascended masters. I think it kind of baffles the mind for a lot of us to realize that there is a way to communicate with them very powerfully. I know in your book you talk about that. What is the name of your book?
It's called Becoming Authentically Me.
Awesome. And where is the best place for people to find you online?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, but they can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Universal Light Warriors. And I've got my website, which is powersoulhealing.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for lending your beautiful personality to our discussion and your knowledge, Brigitte. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Cherie.